You wake up and the room is dark and completely still. The clock reads somewhere between 2 and 4 in the morning. You were not having a nightmare. You did not need the bathroom. You were not too hot or too cold. You simply woke up, eyes open, mind suddenly running, and now sleep is gone and you do not know why. You lie there waiting for it to come back. Sometimes it does after an hour. Sometimes it does not come back at all, and you watch the sky slowly lighten with that particular exhaustion that comes not from too little sleep, but from interrupted sleep, the kind that leaves you functioning at half your capacity the next day, no matter how early you go to bed. And if this has been happening regularly, if 3 in the morning has become an unwanted alarm clock that nobody set, there is something you need to hear, because the explanation most people are given for this pattern is the wrong one entirely. The standard explanation is stress, or aging, or a restless mind that will not quiet down. And sometimes those things are factors. But there is a biological event that happens at a specific time in the night, consistently, in people whose livers are under strain, and its primary symptom is waking up. Not at midnight, not at 5 in the morning, at a very specific window, between 1 and 3, sometimes stretching to 4, with a quality of wakefulness that feels almost like being switched on rather than stirred. A mind that starts moving. A low-level anxiety that feels sourceless. Sometimes a mild tightness under the right side of the rib cage. Sometimes nothing at all except the inexplicable fact of being awake at an hour you have no desire to be awake. If this pattern is familiar, this video may explain something about your body that no one has ever connected for you before. If you want the kind of health content that actually answers the questions instead of skirting around them, hit like and subscribe right now. This is Dr. Victor Lang, and what I care about is giving you the real picture, the one that connects your daily symptoms to the underlying biology so you can actually do something about it. Let us start with the liver, because most people fundamentally misunderstand what this organ does and how central it is to every function in the body that determines how you feel hour to hour. The liver is not just a filter for alcohol. That is the extent of most people's mental model of it, and it wildly understates the scope of what the liver manages. Your liver performs over 500 distinct biological functions, and many of them are on a time schedule. Specifically, there is a window in the late night and early morning hours, roughly between 1 and 3 in the morning, according to both circadian biology research and traditional frameworks that predate modern medicine, when the liver enters its most intensive processing phase. This is the window when the liver ramps up its detoxification work, processes metabolic waste accumulated during the day, regulates overnight blood sugar levels, metabolizes hormones, and manages the complex chemistry of inflammation. It is the biological equivalent of a night shift operation that requires enormous amounts of energy and biochemical resources to run properly. When the liver is healthy and well supported, this nightly operation runs smoothly and you sleep right through it. You have no awareness of it. Your blood sugar stays stable. The detoxification pathways clear efficiently. Hormones are processed and balanced, and you wake up in the morning rather than at 2 or 3, feeling like sleep did what sleep is supposed to do. But when the liver is under strain, when it is carrying more of a toxic load than it can process efficiently, when inflammation has compromised its function, when the specific nutrients it needs to run these overnight operations are depleted, something different happens. The processing backlog creates a biochemical stress response. Cortisol, the stress hormone, rises, blood sugar fluctuates, the nervous system activates, and you wake up, suddenly, in the dark, in that specific window, with that particular quality of wakefulness that feels nothing like a normal early morning. The connection between 3 in the morning waking and liver function has been documented from multiple angles in the research literature on circadian biology and metabolic health. Studies on people with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, one of the most common and underdiagnosed conditions in the modern world, affecting an estimated 1 in 4 adults globally, consistently showed disrupted sleep architecture with frequent nighttime awakenings, particularly in the early morning hours. Research on cortisol dysregulation, which is tightly linked to liver health because the liver is responsible for metabolizing cortisol and regulating its overnight pattern, shows that when cortisol clearance is impaired, the normal overnight cortisol rhythm becomes disrupted, producing inappropriate cortisol surges in the middle of the night. And a cortisol surge at 2 in the morning feels exactly like what millions of people describe: a sudden, alert wakefulness, a racing or busy mind, a sense of low-level tension or unease that has no obvious cause. Here is something that takes most people completely by surprise when they first hear it. The liver has its own version of a food supply crisis at night, and it directly affects sleep in a way that almost nobody explains. Your liver maintains a reserve of stored glucose called glycogen, and it uses this reserve throughout the night to keep your blood sugar stable during the fasting period of sleep. When blood sugar drops, your liver releases glycogen to compensate. But if your liver is congested, fatty, or inflamed, its glycogen storage and release capacity is impaired. Blood sugar drops more than it should in the early morning hours. The brain, which runs exclusively on glucose, detects this drop as a threat. The adrenal glands respond by releasing cortisol and adrenaline to push blood sugar back up. And the physiological noise of that hormonal response is enough to pull you out of sleep completely, leaving you awake, slightly anxious, and unable to understand why. This mechanism, reactive hypoglycemia driven by impaired liver glycogen regulation, is one of the most common and least discussed causes of 3 a.m. waking in people over 40. And the frustrating reality is that it keeps getting misattributed to anxiety, perimenopause, stress, or aging, while the liver that is actually driving the pattern continues in the same strained state, night after night, getting no support and producing the same disruptive result. But how do you actually know if your liver is under the kind of strain we are talking about? Because the liver is famously resilient and famously silent. It does not hurt the way a muscle hurts when it is overworked. It rarely produces dramatic symptoms until dysfunction is quite advanced. But it does produce a language, and once you learn to read it, the signals become surprisingly clear. Persistent fatigue that does not improve with adequate sleep is one of the most consistent early indicators of liver strain. Not the tiredness that comes from a long day and resolves with rest, but a deeper, more chronic depletion that makes mornings feel like a negotiation and afternoons feel like endurance. Bloating and digestive discomfort, particularly in the upper right abdomen, is another. A tendency to feel unusually warm or flushed, particularly in the evening. Skin that looks dull or slightly yellowish around the whites of the eyes, the most recognizable sign that bilirubin processing is backing up. Brain fog that descends unpredictably and makes concentration feel like pushing through something thick. And of course, that specific pattern of waking between 1 and 4 in the morning, fully alert, for no reason that makes obvious sense. None of these symptoms alone is definitive, but when several of them cluster together, and especially when that 3 in the morning waking is part of the picture, the liver deserves serious attention. And here is the part of this story that matters most, the part that shifts the emotional weight of everything we have covered so far from concern toward possibility. The liver is one of the most regenerative organs in the human body. Under the right conditions, with the right support, the liver has a documented capacity to reverse early and moderate dysfunction in a way that almost no other organ can match. This is not wishful thinking. This is established hepatology. The liver can restore impaired detoxification pathways. It can reduce its own inflammation. It can clear fatty infiltration. It can rebuild the glycogen regulation capacity that is producing those cortisol surges at 2 in the morning. But it needs specific, deliberate support to do it. And the evening hours turn out to be the most important window for providing that support. Let us talk about what that support actually looks like, starting with the most powerful and most underappreciated intervention available. The evening meal, specifically its timing and composition, has a more direct effect on overnight liver function than almost any other lifestyle factor. When you eat a large, heavy meal late in the evening, particularly one high in refined carbohydrates, processed fats, or alcohol, you are sending your liver into the night, carrying a processing load it was never designed to handle during the same window it needs for detoxification. The liver has to divide its resources between metabolizing the meal you just gave it and running the overnight processes that clear the day's accumulated waste. Something gets deprioritized. Usually it is the detoxification. The backlog builds. The cortisol response at 2 or 3 in the morning becomes more likely, not less. The practical intervention is this. Finish your last significant meal at least 3 hours before you sleep. If you need something small after that, let it be strategically chosen. A small handful of walnuts provides alpha-linolenic acid and melatonin precursors that support both liver function and sleep onset. A small piece of dark chocolate with high cacao content provides liver-supportive polyphenols and has a mild cortisol-lowering effect. A few bites of something with complex carbohydrate content, like a small piece of whole grain bread or a few crackers with a small amount of protein, can support stable overnight blood sugar without burdening the liver with a major metabolic task, reducing the risk of the hypoglycemic cortisol surge that wakes you at 3. The single most liver-supportive beverage you can drink in the evening, backed by more clinical research than most people realize, is milk thistle tea. The active compound in milk thistle, silymarin, has been studied in dozens of controlled trials for its effects on liver cell regeneration and protection, its ability to reduce hepatic inflammation, and its capacity to enhance the efficiency of the detoxification pathways that are most active during the nighttime window. Drinking a cup of milk thistle tea in the hour before bed is not a folk remedy with vague benefits. It is a targeted intervention with a specific mechanism, delivering silymarin to the liver precisely at the time when the liver's overnight processing cycle is beginning. The research on silymarin's hepatoprotective effects is substantial enough that it is used clinically in some countries as a first-line supportive treatment for liver disease. Drinking it as a nightly tea is one of the simplest and most evidence-aligned things you can do for overnight liver function. Dandelion root tea is another evening option with meaningful clinical support. Dandelion root has been documented to support bile flow, which is critical for the liver's ability to process and eliminate fat-soluble toxins. When bile flow is sluggish, a condition extremely common in people with early liver dysfunction, toxin elimination backs up, the liver's processing load increases, and the nighttime strain compounds. A cup of dandelion root tea in the evening, consumed separately from or alternating with milk thistle, addresses this specific bottleneck in the liver's detoxification workflow. There is a nutrient deficiency running underneath liver dysfunction in the majority of cases that deserves direct attention, and that is B vitamins, particularly B6, B9, and B12, along with choline. The liver's primary detoxification pathway, called methylation, is entirely dependent on these nutrients as cofactors. Without adequate B vitamins, the methylation cycle slows. Toxins that should be chemically modified for safe elimination accumulate instead. The liver works harder with diminishing returns. Inflammation increases, and the overnight cortisol dysregulation that produces 3 in the morning waking worsens. Foods rich in these nutrients, leafy greens, eggs, legumes, quality animal protein, should be a deliberate part of the earlier part of your day, with the understanding that what you eat in the morning and afternoon is directly funding the biochemical machinery the liver will run tonight. Beets deserve a specific mention because their effect on liver function is both well documented and frequently underappreciated. Betaine, a compound found in high concentration in beets, directly supports the liver's methylation cycle and has been shown to reduce hepatic fat accumulation, lower liver inflammation markers, and improve bile production. Beet consumption 2 to 3 times per week, whether as roasted beets, beet juice, or powdered beetroot added to a morning drink, creates a consistent substrate supply for the liver's detoxification work that shows measurable effects in people with early fatty liver changes in as little as 4 to 8 weeks. This is the kind of specific, mechanism-driven nutrition that moves the needle on liver health in a way that general healthy eating advice rarely does. Let us talk about something that exists in almost everyone's evening routine, and that is quietly devastating to liver function and overnight sleep quality in ways that the research is unambiguous about, but that rarely gets said plainly enough. Alcohol in the evening is not a harmless wind-down tool for people whose livers are under strain, not even 1 or 2 glasses. The liver metabolizes alcohol through a pathway that produces a toxic byproduct called acetaldehyde, and clearing acetaldehyde is an intensive task that competes directly with the detoxification work the liver needs to do in the overnight window. Even moderate evening alcohol consumption delays and degrades the liver's overnight processing cycle, elevates morning cortisol, disrupts the deep sleep architecture that the body needs for cellular repair, and worsens the blood sugar regulation that drives 3 in the morning waking. If you are experiencing the nighttime pattern we have been describing, the first and most impactful change you can make to your evening is removing alcohol entirely from it, at least long enough to observe what your body does when the liver is given back the overnight window it needs. Hydration is the other evening variable that most people manage poorly. The liver's filtration and elimination functions depend on adequate fluid volume. When you go to bed mildly dehydrated, which is a common condition particularly in older adults whose thirst mechanisms have become less sensitive, the liver's ability to flush processed toxins into the bile for elimination is compromised. Blood becomes slightly more concentrated, and the work of filtering it is harder. Drinking adequately through the afternoon and early evening, tapering off in the hour or two before bed to avoid sleep disruption, maintains the fluid environment the liver needs to run its overnight operations effectively. There is a larger truth sitting underneath everything we have discussed today, and it is worth sitting with for a moment. The body has rhythms, internal clocks that govern which systems operate at which times, allocating resources and running processes according to a schedule that evolution developed over millions of years. When those rhythms are supported, when you eat in alignment with them, sleep in alignment with them, and make choices that give your organs the conditions they need during their active windows, the body performs with a reliability and a resilience that is genuinely remarkable. When those rhythms are chronically disrupted, when the liver enters its processing window carrying a load it cannot handle in the time available, the system produces signals, not dramatic alarms, quiet, consistent, easy to dismiss signals, like waking at 3 in the morning and not knowing why. You know now, and knowing changes the choices available to you. Every evening is an opportunity to either burden the liver during the window when it is doing its most critical work, or to support it. The meal timing, the specific teas, the nutrient-dense foods, the alcohol reduction, the hydration, none of these requires extraordinary effort. Each of them, done consistently over weeks and months, shifts the overnight biology from a state of strain and dysregulation towards something your body was designed to be capable of. Deep, uninterrupted sleep, a stable hormonal rhythm through the night, a liver that clears what it needs to clear and wakes you in the morning rather than at 2, a quality of energy in the daytime that comes not from coffee compensating for bad nights, but from rest that actually restored you. That is not a fantasy version of health. It is what happens when an organ that is carrying more than it should be carrying is finally given the support it was always asking for. The 3 in the morning waking was never a mystery without an answer. It was a message, and now that you know what it is saying, you can decide what to do about it. If this explains something you have been living with and not understanding, I want to hear about it in the comments below. Tell me what your nights have looked like. Tell me what part of this connected for you, and if someone you care about has been quietly struggling with this same pattern, waking in the early morning hours, tired and not knowing why, please share this video with them, because the difference between carrying this unknowingly and understanding what is actually driving it can be the difference between years of disrupted nights and finally, genuinely sleeping through. Your body has been sending you a message at 3 in the morning. Tonight, you can start sending one back.